In a world threatened by darkness, three unlikely heroes embark on a journey of courage, unity, and perseverance. The final battle, uniting against the darkness of the Ark of Noah, is a gripping tale that uncovers the secrets of the birth of humanity and predictions about the end of the world. Join us for an epic adventure that will leave you speechless until the very end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling content. Chapter 1: The Dive. Detective Ollie stood on the rocky shore of the Black Sea, his eyes scanning the horizon. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the water, and the waves were gently lapping against the shore. Ollie had been called to investigate a murder, and he was feeling uneasy. Something about this case didn't feel right. He turned to his partner, Detective Imre. "You ready to go?" he asked. Imre nodded, and they both donned their scuba gear. They had been told that the body was at the bottom of the sea, and they needed to dive to retrieve it. As they swam deeper into the sea, Ollie's mind began to wander. He had always been fascinated by the ancient civilizations that had once thrived in this part of the world. He had read about the myths and legends that surrounded the Black Sea, and he wondered if there was any truth to them. Suddenly, Imre tapped him on the shoulder, pointing to a dark shape in the distance. As they swam closer, Ollie could see that it was a large object, partially buried in the sand. His heart raced as he realized what it was. "The Ark," he whispered. They swam closer, and Ollie could see that the object was indeed the remains of a massive wooden structure. He could see the outline of rooms and compartments, and he felt a thrill of excitement run through him. But as they drew closer, they saw something even more shocking. A group of people were gathered on the deck of the Ark, looking down at them with expressions of anger and fear. "Who are they?" Imre asked. Ollie shook his head, his mind reeling. "I don't know," he said, "but we need to find out." Chapter 2: The Discovery. The detectives climbed onto the deck of the Ark, their hearts pounding with excitement and disbelief. They had stumbled upon one of the greatest discoveries in human history. The people on the deck were a mix of ages and ethnicities, dressed in what appeared to be ancient robes and tunics. They spoke in a language Ollie and Imre didn't recognize, and they seemed agitated and fearful. One of the older men, with a long white beard, stepped forward and spoke to them in broken English. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Why have you come here?" Ollie and Imre explained that they were investigating a murder and had stumbled upon the Ark by accident. The man seemed to relax a bit, but he still looked suspicious. "We have been living here for many years," he said. "We are the descendants of those who were saved by Noah in the Great Flood." Ollie and Imre exchanged a look. They had heard the stories, of course, but they had always assumed they were just myths. Now they were face to face with the living proof of those stories. The old man, whose name was Methuselah, showed them around the Ark, explaining how they had been able to survive all these years. He showed them the gardens where they grew their food, the animals they had brought with them, and the rooms where they slept. As they walked through the dark, musty corridors, Ollie felt a sense of wonder and awe. This was like nothing he had ever experienced before. But then, they stumbled upon something even more incredible. In one of the rooms, they found ancient scrolls, written in a language they couldn't read. Methuselah told them that they were the secrets of the birth of humanity and predictions about the end of the world. Chapter 3: The Translation. Back in their hotel room, Ollie and Imre carefully unrolled the ancient scrolls they had found on the Arkansas. The paper was fragile, and the writing was faded, but they could make out some of the words. For days, they worked tirelessly to translate the scrolls, poring over dictionaries and old texts. It was slow going, but they were determined to uncover the secrets of these ancient documents. Finally, they made a breakthrough. They discovered that the scrolls contained prophecies about the end of the world, and they were shocked by what they read. According to the scrolls, the end of the world was imminent. A great cataclysm would soon strike the earth, wiping out all life as we know it. But there was a glimmer of hope. The scrolls also spoke of a way to survive the apocalypse, a way to ensure that humanity would endure. Ollie and Imre were stunned by what they had uncovered. They knew that they had to share this information with the world, but they also knew that they would be met with skepticism and disbelief. They decided to go public with their findings, holding a press conference to announce the discovery of the scrolls and their translation. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The media was abuzz with talk of the end of the world, and people around the globe were both frightened and intrigued. As the days went by, Ollie and Imre became celebrities, their faces plastered on magazine covers and news shows. They were hailed as heroes, the men who had unlocked the secrets of the ancient scrolls. But as the world waited with bated breath for the apocalypse, Ollie and Imre began to have doubts. What if they were wrong? What if the scrolls were just the ramblings of ancient madmen? Chapter 4: The Betrayal. As the world buzzed with anticipation and fear, Ollie and Imre struggled with their own doubts. They knew that they had made a huge discovery, but they couldn't help wondering if they had made a mistake. One day, they received a visit from a man named Mustafa, who claimed to be a descendant of Noah and a member of the group living on the Arkansas. Mustafa was kind and friendly, but Ollie and Imre couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. Over the next few weeks, Mustafa visited them often, bringing them food and gifts, and telling them stories about his people. He seemed to genuinely like Ollie and Imre, and they started to think of him as a friend. But then, one day, Mustafa disappeared. Ollie and Imre tried to reach out to him, but he didn't answer their calls or emails. They were puzzled and a bit hurt, but they assumed that Mustafa had just moved on with his life. That's when things started to get strange. Ollie and Imre began to receive threatening letters and phone calls, warning them to stop talking about the end of the world. They were told that their lives were in danger if they didn't back down. At first, they ignored the threats, thinking that it was just some overzealous religious group trying to scare them. But then, one night, they were attacked in their hotel room by a group of masked men. Ollie and Imre fought back, but they were no match for their attackers. They were tied up and taken away, their mouths covered with duct tape so they couldn't scream for help. As they were dragged through the streets, Ollie and Imre realized with horror that they had been betrayed by Mustafa. He had been working with a group all along, feeding them information about Ollie and Imre's movements and plans. Now, they were at the mercy of the people who wanted to silence them. They had no idea what was going to happen to them, but they knew that they were in grave danger. Chapter 5: The Escape Plan. Ollie and Imre were thrown into a dark room, their hands still tied and their mouths still gagged. They could hear muffled voices outside the door, and they knew that they were in serious trouble. After several hours, the door creaked open, and two men entered the room. They were both large and intimidating, and Ollie and Imre knew that they had to act fast if they wanted to survive. "What do you want from us?" Ollie demanded, his voice muffled by the tape. The men just laughed, and one of them pulled out a knife. "We want you to keep your mouth shut," he snarled, advancing on Ollie and Imre. Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging the room into darkness. There was a scuffle, and then the sound of footsteps running away. Ollie and Imre sat in stunned silence, unsure of what had just happened. Then, they heard a voice whispering in the darkness. "It's me, Mustafa," the voice said. I'm here to help you." Ollie and Imre were hesitant at first, but they knew that they had no other choice. They needed to get out of the building and fast. Mustafa led them through a maze of corridors and staircases, avoiding the groups of men who were searching for them. They made their way to a window, and Mustafa helped Ollie and Imre climb out onto the ledge. "We're on the 5th floor," Imre whispered, his heart pounding in his chest. "I know," Mustafa said calmly. "Just follow me." Mustafa led them to a fire escape, and they began to climb down the rusty metal ladder. Ollie's hands were raw and bleeding from the rough metal, but he didn't care. They were finally free. When they reached the ground, Mustafa led them to a waiting car, and they drove away from the building at breakneck speed. Ollie and Imre were both shaken and exhausted, but they knew that they were lucky to be alive. They had narrowly escaped death, thanks to Mustafa's bravery and quick thinking. "Thank you," Imre said, tears in his eyes. "Thank you for saving us." Mustafa just smiled. "I had to do it," he said. "You're my friends." Ollie and Imre looked at each other, realizing that Mustafa was not just a friend, but a true ally. They knew that they had to trust him if they wanted to survive the coming apocalypse. Chapter 6: The Revelation. After their narrow escape, Ollie and Imre decided to lay low for a while. They moved to a new hotel and tried to stay off the grid as much as possible. But they couldn't stop thinking about what they had discovered on the Arkansas. They knew that they had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that could change the course of human history. One day, they received a message from Mustafa. He asked them to meet him at a quiet cafe in the outskirts of the city. Ollie and Imre were hesitant, but they knew that they had to see Mustafa again. They met him at the cafe, and he led them to a private room in the back. "Listen," Mustafa said, his voice urgent. "I have something to show you." He pulled out a leather-bound book, ancient and weathered. He opened it to a page near the middle, and Ollie and Imre gasped in awe. The page was filled with intricate drawings and symbols, unlike anything they had ever seen before. Mustafa began to translate the text, his voice trembling with excitement. "This is a prophecy," he said. "It tells of the end of the world and the birth of a new one. It speaks of a chosen one who will lead humanity to salvation." Ollie and Imre listened in rapt attention as Mustafa continued to read from the book. They were both amazed by the depth and complexity of the prophecy, and they knew that they had to share it with the world. "We have to tell everyone," Imre said. "We can't keep this a secret." Mustafa nodded in agreement. "But we have to be careful," he warned. "There are powerful people who will stop at nothing to keep this information from getting out." Ollie and Imre knew that Mustafa was right. They had already faced danger once, and they knew that they were not safe. But they also knew that they had a responsibility to share this knowledge with the world. They had to warn people of what was to come and give them hope for the future. Chapter 7: The Conspiracy. As Ollie, Imre, and Mustafa worked to spread the word about the prophecy, they began to realize that they were up against a powerful conspiracy. There were people who didn't want the truth to come out, and they would stop at nothing to keep their secrets safe. One night, as they were leaving a meeting with a group of activists, they were ambushed by a group of masked men. Mustafa was knocked unconscious, and Ollie and Imre were dragged into a van and driven to an unknown location. When they finally arrived, they were thrown into a cold, dark room. The only light came from a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. After what felt like hours, the door creaked open, and a man entered the room. He was tall and imposing, with a deep, gravelly voice. "You've been causing us a lot of trouble," he said, pacing back and forth in front of Ollie and Imre. We can't have you spreading lies and causing panic." "What lies?" Ollie demanded, his voice rising in anger. "We're telling the truth. You're the ones hiding the truth." The man just laughed. "You're naive," he said. "There are things in this world that you don't understand. Things that you can't comprehend." He pulled out a gun and pointed it at Ollie's head. "But you don't have to understand," he said. "You just have to be quiet." Suddenly, the lights went out, and there was a scuffle in the darkness. When the lights came back on, the man was lying on the ground, unconscious. Ollie and Imre looked up to see Mustafa standing in the doorway, a look of determination on his face. "We have to get out of here," he said, helping them to their feet. They ran out of the building and into the night, not stopping until they were miles away. Ollie and Imre were both shaken and scared, but they knew that they couldn't give up. They had to keep fighting, no matter what the cost. Chapter 8: The Broadcast. After their narrow escape from the conspiracy, Ollie, Imre, and Mustafa knew that they had to act quickly. They needed to get their message out to the world before they were silenced for good. They decided to broadcast their findings on a popular news network, hoping that the world would take notice. As they waited for their turn on air, they could feel the tension building. They knew that they were taking a huge risk, but they also knew that it was the only way to get their message out. Finally, the moment arrived. They were introduced on air, and Ollie began to speak. "Good evening," he said, his voice calm and measured. "We are here today to share with you some information that we believe is of the utmost importance." He went on to explain the prophecy that they had discovered, and what it could mean for the future of humanity. Imre and Mustafa chimed in, adding their own insights and experiences. As they spoke, they could feel the weight of the world on their shoulders. They knew that they were exposing themselves to danger, but they also knew that they had a duty to share the truth. When they finished, there was a moment of silence. Then, the news anchor spoke. "We will have to verify these claims," he said. "But if they are true, then this could be one of the most important discoveries in human history." The broadcast ended, and Ollie, Imre, and Mustafa waited nervously for the fallout. But to their surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People from all over the world reached out to them, thanking them for their bravery and determination. They were hailed as heroes, and their message spread like wildfire. For the first time in a long time, Ollie, Imre, and Mustafa felt a glimmer of hope. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they also knew that they had the support of millions of people around the world. Chapter 9: The Betrayal. As their message continued to spread, Ollie, Imre, and Mustafa began to receive offers of help from all corners of the globe. There were people who wanted to fund their research, protect them from harm, and even join their cause. But amidst all the support, there was one offer that caught them off guard. It came from a man named Hassan, who claimed to be a wealthy businessman with a deep interest in their cause. At first, Ollie, Imre, and Mustafa were hesitant. They had been burned before, and they didn't want to trust someone who they barely knew. But Hassan was persistent. He invited them to his lavish home, promising to provide them with everything they needed to succeed. In the end, they agreed to meet with him. They arrived at his home, marveling at the opulence and luxury that surrounded them. Hassan greeted them warmly, offering them drinks and snacks. They talked for hours, discussing their research and plans for the future. As the night wore on, Ollie, Imre, and Mustafa began to feel more comfortable. They let their guard down, laughing and joking with Hassan like old friends. But then, things took a sinister turn. Hassan revealed that he had a hidden agenda. He wasn't interested in helping them spread the truth. He wanted to use their research for his own gain. He pulled out a gun and pointed it at them, his eyes flashing with greed and malice. "You are going to give me everything you have," he said. "And if you don't, you will regret it." Ali, Imre, and Mustafa tried to reason with him, to plead for their lives. But Hassan was beyond reason. He was a man consumed by his own desire for power and wealth. In the end, they managed to escape with their lives, but they knew that they had been betrayed. They vowed to be more careful in the future, to trust no one but themselves. Chapter 10: The Final Stand. As the days passed, Ali, Imre, and Mustafa continued to spread their message. They held rallies, gave speeches, and talked to anyone who would listen. But they also knew that time was running out. The prophecy they had discovered predicted a catastrophic event, one that would change the course of human history forever. They needed to act fast, to prepare for the worst-case scenario. They gathered a group of volunteers, people who believed in their cause and were willing to fight for it. They trained rigorously, honing their skills and preparing for any eventuality. They scouted out potential safe zones, places where they could go to weather the storm. And then it happened. The catastrophic event that they had been dreading. A massive earthquake shook the world, unleashing destruction and chaos on a scale that no one had ever seen before. People panicked, running through the streets and screaming for help. Buildings collapsed, bridges crumbled, and fires raged out of control. But Ali, Imre, and Mustafa and their team were ready. They sprang into action, using their training and knowledge to help those in need. They set up a base camp in a remote area, away from the worst of the destruction. They provided food, water, and shelter to anyone who needed it. And as they worked, they could see a glimmer of hope. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they also knew that they were making a difference. They had fought against the forces of darkness and ignorance, and they had emerged victorious. Chapter 11: The Revelation. As the world began to recover from the earthquake, Ali, Imre, and Mustafa and their team continued to work tirelessly. They provided aid to those in need, rebuilding homes and communities, and spreading their message of hope and unity. But as they worked, they also made a stunning discovery. They had found a hidden chamber deep beneath the rubble of Noah's Ark, a chamber that contained ancient texts and artifacts that shed new light on the history of humanity. The text told of a time before the Great Flood, a time when humans and gods lived together in harmony. They told of a powerful force that had sought to destroy the world, but had been stopped by a courageous few. And they revealed a shocking truth. The prophecy that Ali, Imre, and Mustafa had been following was not just a prediction of the end of the world, but a warning about the return of that same powerful force. They knew what they had to do. They had to spread their message far and wide, to prepare the world for the coming battle. And so, they set out on a new mission. They traveled the globe, speaking to people from all walks of life. They shared their knowledge and their vision of a world united, one that could stand against the forces of darkness and destruction. And as they spoke, they could see that their message was resonating. People were waking up to the truth, to the realization that they had a choice. They could either succumb to the chaos and destruction, or they could join together to create a new world, one built on compassion, understanding, and love. Ali, Imre, and Mustafa knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the support of people from all over the world. And with that support, they knew that they could achieve anything. Chapter 12: The Final Battle. As Ali, Imre, and Mustafa and their team continued to spread their message of hope and unity, They knew that the time for action was drawing near. They had been preparing for the final battle, the one that would determine the fate of humanity. They had trained their volunteers rigorously, teaching them the skills they would need to fight the forces of darkness and destruction. They had scouted out potential safe zones, places where they could take refuge if necessary. And they had gathered powerful allies, people who believed in their cause and were willing to fight alongside them. But they also knew that the enemy was powerful. They were up against a force that had been planning their return for centuries, a force that would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. And so, they braced themselves for the worst. They fortified their base camp, built walls and barriers to protect themselves from attack. And then it came. The final battle, the one that would determine the fate of the world. The enemy descended upon them, a horde of darkness and chaos that seemed almost unbeatable. But Ali, Imre, and Mustafa and their team were ready. They fought with all their might, using the skills and knowledge they had acquired to hold their ground. And then, something miraculous happened. The people they had been speaking to, the ones who had heard their message of hope and unity, began to rise up. They joined the fight, adding their strength to the battle. And as they fought together, they could feel the power of love and unity coursing through their veins. They knew that they had the strength to defeat the darkness, to create a new world, one that was built on compassion and understanding. And in the end, they emerged victorious. They had fought against the forces of darkness and destruction, and they had won. As they stood together, surveying the aftermath of the battle, they knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But they also knew that they had each other, and that they had the support of people from all over the world. And with that support, they knew that they could achieve anything. Chapter 13. The New Beginning. The world was forever changed after the final battle. The forces of darkness and destruction had been defeated, and a new era had begun. Ali, Imre, and Mustafa and their team had become symbols of hope and unity, celebrated and revered by people all over the world. They had shown that even in the darkest of times, there was always a way forward, always a way to build a better world. They worked tirelessly to rebuild the communities that had been destroyed, providing aid and support to those in need. They continued to spread their message of love and unity, inspiring people to work together to create a better future. And as they worked, they could see that the world was changing. People were beginning to come together, to put aside their differences and work towards a common goal. And it wasn't just the people. The world itself seemed to be healing, as if the defeat of the forces of darkness had lifted a weight from the earth's shoulders. The skies were clearer, the air was fresher, and the world was more beautiful than it had ever been before. And as they looked out at this new world, Ali, Imre, and Mustafa knew that they had accomplished something truly great. They had helped to create a world where love and unity were the guiding principles, a world where people could live in peace and harmony. And they knew that their work was not done. There were still challenges to overcome, still battles to be fought. But they also knew that they had the strength and the support to overcome anything. And so, they set out on a new journey, one that would take them to every corner of the globe. They would continue to spread their message of hope and unity, inspiring people to work together to create a better world. And as they traveled, they knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the support of people from all over the world. And with that support, they knew that they could achieve anything. Chapter 14. The Prophecy. As Ali, Imre, and Mustafa continued their journey, they came across an ancient manuscript. It was written in a language they did not recognize, but there was something about it that drew them in. As they began to decipher the text, they realized that it was a prophecy, one that spoke of a time of great darkness and destruction. But it also spoke of a group of people who would rise up to fight against the darkness, a group of people who would bring about a new era of peace and harmony. Ali, Imre, and Mustafa were stunned. The prophecy seemed to describe the events that they had just lived through, the final battle that had taken place just a few months before. But there was more to the prophecy than just that. It also spoke of a new challenge, one that would test the limits of their strength and their resolve. According to the prophecy, a new force would rise up, one that was even more powerful than the forces of darkness they had just defeated. This force would seek to undo all of the work they had done, to plunge the world back into darkness and chaos. Ali, Imre, and Mustafa knew that they had to be ready. They had to be prepared to face this new challenge, to fight for the future of humanity once again. And so, they set out to gather allies, to strengthen their defenses, and to prepare for the battle ahead. They knew that this time, the stakes were even higher, and the challenge even greater. But they also knew that they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the support of people from all over the world. And with that support, they knew that they could overcome anything. Chapter 15. The Final Battle. As Ali, Imre, and Mustafa prepared for the final battle, the tension was palpable. They had gathered an army of allies from all corners of the globe to fight alongside them. They knew that this battle would be different from any they had faced before. The forces of darkness had been formidable, but this new force was even more powerful, more cunning, and more determined to see the world plunged into chaos. As they stood on the battlefield, Ali, Imre, and Mustafa could feel the weight of the world on their shoulders. But they also knew that they had each other, and they had the support of their allies. The battle was fierce, with both sides giving everything they had. It seemed as if the forces of darkness were winning, pushing back their opponents with ease. But then, something unexpected happened. As the battle raged on, a bright light appeared in the sky. It grew brighter and brighter until it was blinding. And then, from the light emerged a figure, unlike anything any of them had ever seen before. It was a being of pure light, radiating energy and power. The being moved towards the forces of darkness, and as it did, they began to falter. Their attacks grew weaker, their resolve began to crumble. And then, with one final burst of energy, the being of light obliterated the forces of darkness, scattering them to the winds. As the dust settled, Ali, Imre, and Mustafa could hardly believe what they had just witnessed. The being of light turned towards them and spoke, its voice like music. "You have done well, my children," it said. "You have fought bravely, and you have succeeded in your mission." The being then turned and disappeared back into the light, leaving Ali, Imre, and Mustafa standing in stunned silence. But then, slowly, the silence was broken by the sounds of celebration. The people who had fought alongside them were cheering, hugging each other, and celebrating the victory. And as they looked around at the smiling faces, Ali, Imre, and Mustafa knew that they had succeeded. They had fought for the future of humanity, and they had won. The end. Months had passed since the final battle, and the world was a different place. The darkness that had once threatened to consume everything had been banished, replaced by a new era of hope and light. Ali, Imre, and Mustafa had returned to their lives, but they knew that things would never be the same. They had been part of something greater than themselves, something that had changed the course of history. And they were not the only ones who felt this way. People all over the world were inspired by their story, by the way they had come together to fight for a better future. The three friends continued to work together, traveling the world and speaking to anyone who would listen. They wanted to ensure that the lessons they had learned, the lessons of courage, unity, and perseverance, were not forgotten. And as they looked out at the world, they saw signs of progress everywhere. People were coming together, working towards a common goal, and creating a better future for themselves and for generations to come. As they sat together, reflecting on their journey, Imre spoke up. "Do you ever think about the prophecy?" he asked. Ali and Mustafa nodded, remembering the ancient manuscript that had foretold their journey. "I think about it all the time," Ali said. "And I wonder what the future holds." Mustafa smiled. "Whatever the future holds, we'll be ready for it," he said. "Together." And with that, the three friends raised a toast to the future, to the world they had helped to create, and to the power of hope, unity, and love. I know that some of the best story ideas come from you. Feel free to share your story ideas in the comments section below.